Good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure, particular pleasure, to be able to introduce Morita Minoru. Minoru. In Japan, he's always called Sensei, because and correctly, because he really is, I would say, Japan's top expert on the political goings-on in this country. In fact, he's such an expert that the people in power tried to ban him from appearing on television because his criticisms were so strong and accurate, I might add. He is extremely well informed about politics here in this country. And by complete chance, I picked up my copy of this for monthly. And even at the age of 84, he is still in there making his criticisms, particularly of the Abe government, which he accuses of being dokusai seisai, of being a dictatorial regime. Anyway, today I hope that he will elaborate on this topic for us. So, as I say, it's my pleasure to introduce Morita Sensei. Thank you.
Morita Minoru でございます。
Hello, my name is Minoru Morita.
ただいまクラーク先生から大変過分なお褒めの言葉をいただきまして感謝いたします。
I am very grateful and appreciative for the words of praise which Clark Sensei has just bestowed upon me.
安倍政権は今危機に立っております。
The Abe government, the Abe administration is now in a very particular position.
安倍内閣の支持率は急激に落ちております。
There has been a rapid decrease in the support rates of the Abe administration.
その内容を見ますと、安倍総理を信用できない、安倍首相個人を信用できないという理由が最大の理由になっております。
And when you examine the contents of this decline in support, the greatest reason for that is the feeling that Prime Minister Abe himself personally cannot be trusted.
しかも女性の支持率が極端に低くなっております。
And particularly the support rates of women are extremely low.
選挙において女性の動きが選挙の方向を決定するというのが日本の現状でありますから、女性の支持を失ったというのは深刻なことだと思います。
It is widely believed that in Japan, the situation or the direction in which the support of women is placed at the time of an election has a great influence on how the election plays out. Therefore, the fact that Prime Minister Abe and his administration have lost the support of women is a serious issue.
このことは安倍総理自身も非常に気にしております。
And Prime Minister Abe himself is also extremely concerned about this situation.
なんとかこのあり地獄に落ちたような状況から這い上がりたいというように焦っていると私は思います。
And I believe that he is now somewhat scrambling or rushing to find a way to crawl out of this, well, the hellhole that he has somehow fallen into.
8月3日に行われました内閣改造で少しでもですね、この支持率の下落を止めたいという願望で行われました。
And the cabinet reshuffling, which took place on August the 3rd or yesterday, took place within the aim or goal of Prime Minister Abe to somehow stop this rapid decline in support.
正解は政治家の人たちは8月の中旬頃までに出る各報道機関の世論調査に非常に神経を尖らしております。
And well, the political world and the politicians themselves are now very much concerned about what results will be seen in the public opinion polls, which will be published in the media in the middle of August.
この世論調査でさらに安倍内閣の支持率が落ちるということになりましたら、安倍政権は本当に苦境に立つと思います。
And if in these opinion polls in the middle of this month show a further decline in support for Prime Minister Abe's cabinet, then this will put the administration in a very difficult situation.
安倍首相は一時は非常に強い政権だったと思います。
I believe that the Abe administration was at one time extremely strong.
2012年12月の選挙で勝利して政権を確立いたしまして以後、国政選挙および統一地方選挙において全て勝利しております。
Since the election victory in December of 2012, after which Prime Minister Abe formed his government, their party had been successful in all national and the simultaneous local elections which followed.
2回の衆議院総選挙、2回の参議院選挙、1回の統一地方選挙、このすべての選挙で勝利いたしました。
So during that period, there were 2 House of Representatives elections, 2 also for the House of Councillors, and also once the local elections all over Japan as well. And in each of these, they did have victory.
第二次世界戦争後、日本は議会制民主主義の国になりましたが、これほど衆議院選挙2度、参議院選挙2度、統一選挙も含めて全部勝利したという首相は安倍晋三氏が初めてであります。
In the period following World War II, Japan became a parliamentary democracy. During this time, or during the whole period since World War II, Prime Minister Abe is the only prime minister who has achieved victory in such a number of succeeding elections, 2 House of Representatives, 2 House of Councillors, and the local elections.
最長の7年7ヶ月首相を続けました佐藤栄作氏も国政選挙は勝ちましたが、地方選挙では敗北を続けました。
If we were to look at the longest serving Japanese Prime Minister, Mr. Sato Eisaku, who served for 7 years and 7 months, while he was successful in national elections during that period, they suffered loss at the local elections during that time.
7年以上政権を担当しましたもう一人の吉田茂も衆議院選挙だけは勝ちましたけれども、その他の選挙では敗北を続けました。
And one further person who had a very long time in government, in fact more than 7 years also, was Mr. Yoshida Shigeru. However, while he was successful in the House of Representatives elections, his party was not able to win in other elections during his term.
安倍内閣は絶頂期を迎えた状況の中で転落を始めました。
And the Abe cabinet began its downfall just as it was entering the period of the longer term.
きっかけは昨年夏の東京都知事選挙です。
And the impetus or the timing when this started to happen was at the time of the gubernatorial elections of Tokyo last year.
ちょうど1年前、小池百合子女子が自由民主党の党籍を持ったまま自由民主党の推薦を受けずに立候補して自由民主党の推薦候補を破って当選しました。
It was almost exactly 1 year ago that Ms. Koike Yuriko, who was still listed as a member of the Liberal Democratic Party at the time, stood for the governor of Tokyo without the support of the LDP and actually was successful over the LDP-supported candidate.
11ヶ月後の今年の7月初めの東京都議会議員選挙におきまして、小池百合子氏をリーダーとする都民ファーストが圧勝しました。
In the elections for the Tokyo Metropolitan Assembly, which took place 11 months after this in July of this year, the Tomin First Party, or Tokyo Citizens First Party, led by Ms. Koike, had an overwhelming success.
この参議院失礼しました。この東京都議会議員選挙の直前から安倍内閣の支持率が 下がり始めました。
And it was from just before the Tokyo Metropolitan Assembly elections that the support for the Abe administration began to decline.
選挙が終わった後も下がり続けております。
And it has continued to fall even in the post-Tokyo election period.
8月3日の安倍内閣の内閣改造は、この安倍内閣の支持率の下降を止めるために行った改造であります。
And the reshuffling of the cabinet yesterday on August 3rd by Mr. Abe was for the purpose of trying to put a stop to this fall in support for his cabinet.
この2、3ヶ月、一般の人々もおごれるもの久しからずと、かの平家物語の言葉を使うようになりまして、この言葉で安倍首相の状況を批判するようになりました。
And in the past 2 to 3 months, the ordinary people of Japan as well have started to be heavily critical of the Prime Minister and his cabinet, referring often to phrases in the Heike Monogatari or the Japanese traditional literature which talks about this fall of support.
さらにエコひいき政治は困るという言葉が普及いたしました。
And further, another phrase which has started to be heard is that politics which is based on ekohiki or giving certain favors has also started to come, well, out of favor, shall we say.
安倍内閣のこの支持率の低下の最大の原因は加計幸太郎という人物に利益になるような行政を行ったというところにあります。
The greatest reason for the fall in support of the Abe cabinet lies in the reason of the individual called Mr. Kake Kotaro and the fact that, well, certain political decisions were made to give him favor or in his interest.
日本の実力ある政治権力者は時として自分の身内や自分の親しい人に利益を与えるということは過去にもありました。
There have been cases or examples in the past, of course, where politicians who have influence in Japan, power in Japan, do make decisions to give things in the interest of people who are close to them.
しかしながら常にそういう場合にはそのことが国民に知らされないようにその配慮してですね、非常に注意深く行ってきました。
However, in all of these cases, until now, this has been done in a very cautious manner, with consideration to make sure that this information would not become known to the general public.
しかし、安倍晋三氏は、加計幸太郎氏とのゴルフ、加計幸太郎氏との夕食というものをですね、かなりオープンにして行ってきました。
However, Mr. Shinzo Abe was relatively open in regards to his playing golf or having dinner and so on with Mr. Kake Kotaro.
この言葉が実際に守られてきたかどうかは別にしまして、日本のトップリーダーの政治家は常に口にしてきた言葉です。理科に冠を正さず、理科に冠を正さず、疑わしいことはしてはいけないんだということをですね、口にしてきましたし、守ってきました。
And there is a particular phrase in Japanese, but whether it is actually being followed by politicians or not is, of course, a question. But Japanese leaders, the top leaders, often refer to a particular phrase which means that they should not be able to do something which could bring suspicion or which could bring doubt.
私は6月の末に安倍総理大臣秘書官で旧知の人がいるんですが、その人から電話をもらいましてですね、安倍総理が森田さんに会いたいと言ってますと、昼飯でも食べたいと言ってますと、どうぞ森田さんは自由に意見を言ってくださいという、要請の電話がありました。
Around the end of June this year, I received a telephone call from a staff of Prime Minister Abe who I have known for a long time. He gave me the request that Prime Minister Abe wanted to meet with me and invited me to lunch, saying that I was able to speak freely on that opportunity.
私はかなりスケジュールが6月中は詰まっている事情を説明いたしまして、安倍総理大臣が G20 から帰ってきた後の7月13日のお昼に、二階幹事長を含めて3人で食事することになりました。
And I explained in response that my schedule for the month of June was rather tight, however, set an appointment to have lunch with Prime Minister Abe upon his return from the G20. On July the 23rd, I had lunch with Prime Minister Abe and also with Secretary General of the LDP, Mr. Nikai.
3人が席に着くと同時に安倍首相は、加計学園問題について自分が直接関与したことはないという事情をかなり詳しく私に向かって説明しました。
And almost immediately after the three of us were seated, Prime Minister Abe started to explain to me that he was not directly involved in the Kake Gakuen situation.
私は安倍総理にとって、加計問題は非常に心理的圧迫を受けている問題だなと感じながら安倍総理の話を聞きました。
And I listened to Prime Minister Abe at that time, feeling that this issue or the problem surrounding the Kake Gakuen was something really, well, hitting Prime Minister Abe at the core, shall we say.
日本で政治家が一番信用を失うのはエコひいき、不公正、誰かに利益を与え誰かに損をさせるようなことをすること、このことが政治家が一番信用を失うことなんです。
And the one aspect, the one thing which will lead to the loss of trust of politicians in Japan the most, the key aspect is this word again, ekohiki, giving particular favors, seen to be treating in an unfair way or giving benefits to some people at the sacrifice of others.
したがって安倍総理が家計問題で非常に傷ついていると、精神も圧迫を受けているということが分かりましたので、私はですね、このように言いました。筧幸太郎氏はその安倍総理の親友であれば、親友がこうして困っている時に親友を助けるのは友の役割だと。したがって筧幸太郎氏はですね、この事業から撤退するか延期するか、自ら譲歩すべきだと考えると、そのようにしたらどうですかという話をいたしました。
I observe or feel very much that the Kake Gakuen issue has been hurting Prime Minister Abe, not only politically, but also giving him a certain mental pressure in regards to the situation as well. Therefore, I said to him, if indeed Mr. Kake is your close friend, of course, the role of a friend when another friend is in trouble is to help, is to support that friend. Therefore, I suggested that Mr. Kake should consider withdrawing or postponing himself.
この私の発言に対しては安倍総理は沈黙しておりましたし、何にも言いませんでした。二階幹事長も黙って聞いておりました。
However, after I gave this suggestion, Mr. Abe remained silent. He did not say anything at all, and Mr. Nikai also did not say anything.
私は内閣改造によってですね、文部科学大臣は変わりました。いろんなメンバーも変わりました。しかしながらこの問題は簡単に済むようなことではないなと思っております。
In the cabinet reshuffle, there has been a change in the Minister of Education, and other members of the cabinet have also been changed. However, I do not believe this issue is something which can be resolved easily.
私は戦後の歴史とともに、生きてきましたので、戦後のことは一応頭に入っております。
I personally have also lived throughout the post-war period of Japan, and so I very clearly remember this period.
どのような政権も日本においては3年から4年経つと国民から飽きられます。
No matter what government comes into place in Japan, after around 3 to 4 years, the public will get sick of that administration.
早ければ半年1年で飽きられます。
And in fact, if it is fast, this can even happen within 6 months or 1 year that the people will start to give up on that government.
長期政権だった吉田茂政権も佐藤栄作政権も4年前後で非常な強い国民の不満を受けます。
Even those who were in government for a long period, Mr. Yoshida Shigeru and Mr. Sato Eisaku, at around the 4-year mark also started to experience great dissatisfaction from the people.
吉田茂は衆議院の解散で切り抜けようと絶えず衆議院の解散を模索し、時に断行しました。
And in the case of Mr. Yoshida, he attempted to resolve this or to deal with this through a dissolution of the House of Representatives. He was examining the timing and so on for this to take place, to be implemented, and also did go through with the dissolution of the House of Representatives for that purpose.
私は吉田茂内閣の例を挙げることで、安倍総理に対しまして、早期の衆議院の解散総選挙によって自らの信を国民に問うて政治の再出発を図るべきであるというように提言しました。
And by raising this example of Mr. Yoshida and his cabinet to Prime Minister Abe, I was giving the recommendation to Mr. Abe that he should also dissolve the House of Representatives to call for an early general election and to let it be the people's decision to make a judgment on his current cabinet.
安倍総理はそれに対しては沈黙しておりました。
Prime Minister Abe was silent in response to that recommendation.
佐藤栄作内閣総理大臣は常に人事政策これによって切り抜けるように努力しました。
In the case of the cabinet of Prime Minister Sato Eisaku, he made efforts to get through this situation by having a constant review or consideration of policy regarding personnel.
佐藤栄作氏はトカゲの尻尾切りばかりやってると言われるほど閣僚をクビにしました。
And Mr. Sato was conducting such a change of his members of the cabinet so often that it was said he was almost chasing his own tail.
甘い人事は行わなかったのです。
However, he did not actually have very easy way of looking at personnel.
私は佐藤栄作氏の例を話すことで、安倍総理は人事に対してもっと厳しく対応しなければならんということを話しました。
And by giving the example of Prime Minister Sato Eisaku, I was giving the recommendation to Prime Minister Abe that he should be more strict in regards to his personnel within the cabinet. He should be more decisive about that.
安倍総理は自らが仲間ばかり集めてお仲間内閣、お友達内閣をやってるという批判に対しては相当答えてたようです。
And I believe that Mr. Abe was very much trying to respond to criticisms that within his cabinet he was only appointing, people very close to him, only appointing friends as members of his cabinet.
私は今度の人事において、岸田外務大臣の希望通り自由民主党の政調会長にすると同時に岸田派の4人のメンバーを閣僚に登用して安倍、岸田同盟に似た関係を作ったのは安倍氏と一番遠い距離にあったこの宏池会岸田派と手を結ぶことでこのエコひいきお仲間だけを大事にするというイメージからの脱却を図ったんだと思います。
I believe that in the cabinet reshuffle conducted this week, the act of Prime Minister Abe which went the most towards this was the repositioning of former Foreign Minister Kishida. Mr. Abe appointed Mr. Kishida to become the chairman of the Policy Research Council of the Liberal Democratic Party as per Mr. Kishida's request or his wishes. So moving Mr. Kishida into this position in the Policy Research Council and appointing 4 members from his faction to the cabinet was a way on the part of Mr. Abe in some way to try to form an Abe-Kishida alliance or cooperation there. So bringing the person who was actually furthest away from him into this position of cooperation. This is one way to make it seem that it's breaking away from the cabinet of giving favors to friends.
私自身も安倍内閣を日常的に厳しく批判しているものの一人ですが、似たような立場にある人と安倍総理はこの批判、個人的に会談を重ねたように聞いております。
I personally am of the position where I am on a regular basis making quite harsh criticisms of Prime Minister Abe and his government. However, I have heard that Mr. Abe has also been hearing similar criticisms from people even of a similar position to him.
安倍総理自身が厳しく批判している人と会うことによってイメージチェンジを図ろうとしたんだと思います。
I also believe that Prime Minister Abe has himself tried to have some kind of a change in his image brought about by meeting with people who are seen as harsh critics of him.
イメージチェンジというのを一生懸命やったのが今度の内閣改造だったと思いますが、日本国民は政治家を信用しなくなっておりますので、上辺だけのものかそうでないかというのを見極める方向に動くと思います。
And I believe that this cabinet reshuffle of this week was a step or an effort towards this change of image. However, the people of Japan at the moment do not trust politicians, and so they will be looking from now whether this is indeed just something happening on the surface level or if there is more substance.
私は憲法改正はもう不可能だと思っております。安倍総理自身も事実上断念したと思います。
I believe that amendment of the Constitution will not be possible, and I believe that Prime Minister himself has actually internally given up on this.
これからは安倍内閣を一日も長く存続させるために彼はいろんなことを考えると思います。
I believe that now Prime Minister Abe is thinking about what he can do or what efforts need to be made in order to prolong his administration even one more day as much as possible.
早期の解散総選挙というのはあり得るんだと思っております。
And I believe that an early dissolution of the parliament and calling of a general election could potentially take place.
ちょうど30分経ちましたので、これをもって私の初めの発言を終わります。
And we have now reached exactly 30 minutes, so I would like to bring to a close my initial remarks.
Thank you very much.
ありがとうございます。
Morita Sensei. One point in the translation, that the Kishida appointment is important because he belongs to the Kochikai. And the Kochikai is a very strong group and separated, quite separate away from the Abe group, you might say. So, I'm just adding to the interpretation. As I predicted, it was a speech full of information and background information, and in particular, the ability or the occasion to speak directly to the Prime Minister in an informal situation is, well, from my experience of journalism, is something of a scoop, and I hope that our audience realizes the value of this information that we received. So I think we should be particularly grateful for this occasion. I now open the floor to questions, and as usual, please identify yourself as clearly as possible, with regular members going first. Do we have a question? Yes, please.
Isabel Reynolds from Bloomberg. Thank you very much for your talk. I was wondering, you mentioned the Kochikai and the kind of alliance between Abe and Mr. Kishida. Given that the main opposition Democratic Party has all but disappeared, are we going to enter a new phase of the dominance of the factions in the LDP? How do you see the role of the factions emerging in the near future?
ありがとうございます。自民党の中でですね、派閥はありますが、ほとんどがですね、懇親会、情報交換の場と、あるいはいろんな情報を売る場という性格のもので、中心の政治家がある種の、独裁的な指導力を持った昔の派閥とはですね、現在の派閥は全く違っております。
First of all, of course, within the Liberal Democratic Party, there are various divisions along faction lines. However, in the current nature of these different factions, they are generally a place for exchange of information, or at times selling information, shall we say. If we compare to how the factions acted in the past, where there was perhaps the politicians at the center of each faction, very influential and almost in a dictatorial manner, the nature of the factions and the role that they play is quite different now.
昔の指導力ある派閥に似ているのは二階俊博の派閥だけだと思います。
I believe that the only faction which is still acting or still in a similar form as these factions of old is that of Mr. Nikai.
他の派閥は本当に緩やかな親睦会というものでありまして、それらの集団が時にですね、総裁選挙の時に団結するってことはありえても、昔の派閥のようにあらゆる問題に共同歩調を取るということはもうなくなってしまっております。
And the other factions, so those other than that of Mr. Nikai, I believe, are very loose gatherings in a way today. Well, at the time, for example, at the election of the president of the Liberal Democratic Party, they may come together in some sort of a strong, joint effort and so on. At other times, they are not working together as closely as the factions of the past, as they were on, various issues coming together to form single policies on blocks and so on.
岸田さんはですね、4年半にわたりまして、安倍外交を安倍さんと一緒に担ってまいりました。
Mr. Kishida was responsible for going forth together with Prime Minister Abe in Abe diplomacy for 4.5 years.
私は大平正義という政治家とはかなり接触をいたしましたが、彼の時代であればですね、例えばですよ、岸信介のような人のもとで外務大臣を受けるなんてことはありえなかったと思います。
I had the opportunity to meet quite often with a politician called Mr. Ohira Masayoshi, and when we would consider what would happen during his time during that period, it would have been unthinkable for him to be foreign minister under someone like Kishi Nobusuke.
岸田さんと岸田派はイメージとしてはそうした大平正義のような平和主義のイメージですけれども、実際にやってることは安倍晋三首相と同じことですから、私はそんなにですね、安倍岸田連携というものがこの政治的につまり政策的な意味というのはそんなにないんじゃないかなと思っております。
And while Mr. Kishida and his faction as an image may have an image very close to that of Ohira Masayoshi, that being, well, very peace-loving or pacifist, shall we say, in actuality, he is not so different to Mr. Abe in terms of policy or actions. Therefore, when we consider this, well, Abe-Kishida alliance and discussions of this, I believe that regarding policy, there is not so much in that.
安保法制の時にですね、憲法解釈の変更を安倍首相は行いましたが、昔の宏池会だったら、このあれで外務大臣を辞職していると思いますね。あくまで安倍さんについていったというのは、宏池会のイメージだけを残していると、それだけだと思います。
And if we look at during the discussion around the amendment of the security bills or security policy in Japan, and when Prime Minister Abe made his change in the proposed for the amendment of the constitution, if this had been the Kochikai as it used to be, well, in such a situation, probably the foreign minister would have stepped down. However, the fact that he stood with Mr. Abe throughout this shows that, well, they're just maintaining the image of the Kochikai. However, in reality, this is not so much there.
民進党のことにも質問がありましたですか。
そう、民進党が今あまり影響力がない中で、自民党の中がどういうふうになっているということですね。
Anthony.
Anthony Rowley, Singapore Business Times. Morita Sensei, you said that you thought Mr. Abe had given up on constitutional revision. He's accepted that it's no longer possible. If that's true, how much incentive does he have to stay in power? Because that, as I understand it, has been one of his principal aims, was to modify the constitution, revise the constitution. So does he really have a passion to stay in power now? And the second question is, what alternative is there to the LDP, even if Mr. Abe's popularity falls to 0 or 1%? There's very little alternative. Or do you think that the Democratic Party, or what remains of it, could form some alliance with other parties and present a viable alternative to the LDP?
私が憲法改正を事実上安倍首相は断念したと申し上げたのはですね、もともと自由民主党がどんな案を作りましてもですね、憲法改正のどんな案を作りましても、私は現在の国会の構成の中で、発議に必要な定数の3分の2を得ることはほとんど不可能だと思っております。
So first of all, in regards to constitutional amendment, when I said that, well, in a way, Prime Minister Abe has given up, or, well, de facto given up on that, I believe that, well, even originally, no matter what kind of draft or proposal the LDP would come up with, within the formation or the structures of the current diet, it would be close to impossible for them to achieve the 2/3 majority required to go ahead with the constitutional amendment.
安倍首相は何が何でも自分の手で憲法改正をしたい。したがって公明党を賛成させるために憲法9条の1項2項はそのまま残し、さらにその中に自衛隊の存在を認める条項を加えるという考え方を発表しておりますけれども、私はそれでもですね、3分の2を売ることは難しいと。それはなぜかと言いますと、公明党が全員含めてその安倍案に乗るということはほとんど考えられないからです。
Prime Minister Abe has the desire to amend the constitution himself. That is his great aim. And as a method towards that, he has, for example, changed the proposal in regards to Article 9 of the constitution as a way to get Komeito to agree to amendment. This proposal is to actually to maintain paragraph 1 and 2 of the existing Article 9 of the constitution, but to add to this language which would clearly recognize the existence of the self-defense forces of Japan. However, I believe that even with such a proposal, it would be difficult to achieve the 2/3 majority required. The reason for this is because it would be very difficult to have all members of Komeito on board for this.
さらにですね、ここが重要な点ですが、たとえ衆議院で定数の3分の2、参議院で定数の3分の2の賛成を得て発議して国民投票を行った場合に、自由民主党が中心になって行う、安倍首相が主導権を持って行う憲法改正には、日本国民の投票者の過半数が賛成するということは、もはやほとんど起こり得ないというのが現状であります。
And further, and this next point is an important point, even if Prime Minister Abe were to achieve a 2/3 majority in both the houses of the Diet, and even if a national referendum regarding constitutional amendment were to take place, under the leadership of Mr. Abe and with the LDP at the center, I believe that it would be almost impossible to have the majority of Japanese voters agree to such an amendment.
最近、安倍首相が本気で憲法改正をしようと、安保法制の制定も行った、解釈も変更したと同時に、北朝鮮が軍事国家としてどんどん成長していると、日本と中国との関係も軍事的対立を含んで危機的な状況にあるという状況の中で、日本国民の意識に大きな変化が起こりました。
In the recent situation, or recently, Prime Minister Abe has been very seriously attempting constitutional amendment and taking steps towards that. We can see, for example, the introduction of the new security bills and also the reinterpretation of the constitution in the cabinet decision as well. We can also see in the regional situation the growth of the military, or the growth of the DPRK as a military power, and also military tensions between China and Japan in a very critical situation now as well. These different factors, I believe, have led to a change in the awareness or how the Japanese people are seeing the situation.
実は戦争を体験した人たちは少数ですが、まだこの世に存在しておりまして、彼らがずっと戦後沈黙してきたところの戦争体験を最近に至って語り始めました。家族会議も開いて話すようになりました。
While it is a minority, there are still a number of people in Japan who did directly experience the war. In the post-war period, since World War II, many of these people had remained silent throughout this period. However, recently, they have begun to speak out. They have begun to meet with their families, for example, to speak of their war experiences.
安倍首相が主導し、憲法9条の改定を含む憲法改正案は国民投票で勝利する可能性はほとんどないと私は分析しております。
According to my personal analysis, it would be almost impossible for there to be a majority in a national referendum calling for a constitutional amendment, including Article 9 of the Constitution under the leadership of Prime Minister Abe.
民進党について一言申しますと、民進党は解体過程に入っております。
And in regards to the question about the Democratic Party, they are in a situation where they are almost falling into oblivion.
私は東京都で起こりました小池新党的なものが全国的に登場して 全国的に出てきて、民進党に代わる自民党政権に対抗する勢力になりうる可能性を持っていると思います。
However, I believe there is a possibility that, well, if we look at what happened in the Tokyo metropolitan situation with the new Kake party appearing, if such a similar situation were to occur on the national level, a new party coming up and standing against the Liberal Democratic Party as an alternative to the current Democratic Party as the opposition, well, this is something which could be a viable scenario.
新しい勢力が次の選挙ないしは次の選挙で登場してくる可能性の方が民進党が再建される可能性よりも大きいと思います。
I believe that there is more likelihood that such a new political power could actually come into place in either the next election or the one after that, rather than the likelihood of the rebuilding of the Democratic Party.
My name is Baumgartner. I'm working for Swiss television. So based on the success of Ms. Koike at the Tokyo election, do you think at the national level, a situation like in France with Mr. Macron, who defeated the two established parties, can happen in Japan? And with or without Mrs. Koike? And how do you explain the success of Ms. Koike, who is an opportunist, who has achieved nothing with Tsukiji and nothing in reducing the cost of the Olympic Games? So how Japanese people could trust Ms. Koike more than Mr. Abe or anyone else here?
日本でもですね、小池都知事のことを女性マクロンというように言う人が多いです。
Even in Japan, there are many people who refer to Ms. Koike as a female Macron.
フランスで起こったマクロンの登場と議会選挙におけるマクロンの勝利と東京都における小池知事の登場、それから小池氏の指導する都民ファーストの勝利というのはほとんど同じ現象だと日本でもほとんどの人が見ていると思います。
And the majority of people in Japan also see that the appearance and victory of Mr. Macron in the French elections and the victory of Governor Koike and the Tomin First Party in the case of Tokyo, most people see this as the same phenomenon occurring.
小池さんが東京都知事を1期か2期で辞めて、国政のリーダーになっていくというのが日本の政治研究者の共通の見方ですけれども、私はそれはありえないと。都知事をですねすぐに辞めるなんてことはできるものではないと思っておりますから、別のリーダーによって全国規模のですねマクロン現象を起こそうとする動きの方が現実的だと思います。
The majority of political researchers or analysts in Japan believe that it is quite likely that Ms. Koike, after perhaps 1 or 2 terms as the governor of Tokyo, will step down and go into national politics as a leader. The majority of people do hold this view. However, I personally do not think this is the case. I do not think that she would be able to step down as governor after such a short period straight away. Rather, I believe that it is more likely that there would be a different leader coming out and having this kind of Macron phenomenon on the national level in Japan.
すでに地方自治体でですねリーダーシップを取っている人々が、動き始めておりまして、次の国政選挙に、何人かはですね、知事とか市長を辞めて、出てきて、新しい政党作りに、参加していくというそういう動きは起こっております。
And if we look at the various local municipal situations or prefectural situations in Japan at the moment, we can see movement amongst the leadership in some places as well. Looking towards the next national elections, we can see, for example, several people who are currently governors or mayors looking at stepping down from these positions and joining new party in order to stand in the next national election.
すでに愛知県の大村知事とか、名古屋の河村市長とか、そういう人たちは活発に動き始めております。
Some examples of these who are already very active, we can see, for example, Governor Omura in Aichi or Mayor Kawamura of Nagoya.
大村さんや河村さんがトップリーダーになれるかどうか、私は否定的ですが、埼玉県の上田が出てくればなる可能性はあると思いますが、今のところは流動的です。
This situation is continuing to be fluid or moving. Whether people such as Governor Omura or Mayor Kawamura would be able to become this kind of top leader is something which I am somewhat negative about. However, if we were to see movement in, for example, Mr. Ueda of Saitama, this is something which could potentially, this is something which I see as feasible.
小池知事の勝利の原因は一言で言いますと、相手がひどすぎたということだと思います。
If we are to look at the reason for success of Governor Koike, I think that the reason, put simply, is that, well, her opponents were just too weak. They were terrible.
Thank you. Khaldun Azhari, Panorate News. How do you see the prospects of this new administration in terms of diplomacy with the appointment of Taro Kono as a foreign minister? And I would like to hear also clarification. Why do Japanese stop to support the government after 4 years? Why is 4 years? And what happens? I mean...
まず外交のことですが、現在の安倍政権の外交政策はですね、北朝鮮に対して、ただただ制裁で臨むと、強硬方針で臨むと、それから北朝鮮に対しては日米同盟を確実なものにして、それによってですね、北朝鮮に乱暴なことをさせないようにやると、いう点はですね貫いておりますけれども、その他の点は今非常に流動的になっていると思いますね。現在日本外交はですね、混迷の中に入りつつあるという状況だと思います。その中で河野太郎が登場してきたんですけれども、新人でもありますしね、相当外交活動はやってるわけですけれども、日本の置かれている状況のですね、複雑なことから言って、彼が特別な指導力を彼に特別な指導力を期待するということは私は難しいのではないか。ただしっかりとしたですね、調査活動といいますかね、そういうものを行ってもらいたいなと思っております。
So in regards to the current policy regarding diplomacy of the Abe administration, if we look at their policy towards the DPRK, we can see, well, they are just looking at imposing sanctions and having this strict approach towards the DPRK, also having the United States-Japan alliance at the center of this approach and policy towards the DPRK, looking at how to prioritize this alliance and not allow the DPRK to, well, do anything that it should not be doing. In regards to other points, however, I believe that Japanese diplomacy is rather fluid at the moment. So within this situation, we have the appearance of Mr. Kono Taro as the new foreign minister. He is, of course, new to this position, although he may have various or rather extensive diplomatic experience in the past. He is new as a foreign minister. And considering the complexity of the situation in which Japan is placed at the moment, I believe that it would be difficult to imagine or to expect a new or a special kind of leadership coming from him in this situation. I do believe, however, that we can expect that he will be rather thorough in regards to research and other activities in his new position.
4年で、国民が、政治家を見放すということですけれども、私はその根本はですね、日本のジャーナリズムが初めは期待するけれども、ある時期までは褒めるけれども、ある時期が過ぎるとですね、足を引っ張り始めると。これが日本のジャーナリズムのですね、文化なわけですね。マッチポンプっていう言葉を使いますけれども、それがですね、大衆の世論を動かしていく大きな原動力だと思います。ですから人によっては半年ぐらいでマスコミは飽きるわけです。だから半年褒めて、あとはですね、足を引っ張り続けると。これは日本のマスコミの文化生態、日本のマスコミの生き方だと思います。ただ全世界的に見て日本のマスコミだけが特殊だとは私は思っておりません。みんな秋っぽいんですよ。そう思います。
And in regards to the question about the 4-year mark and why it is that the public starts to lose support at that point, I believe that the fundamental aspect of this is looking at Japanese journalism. I believe that at first, Japanese mass media tends to place high expectations on a government or politicians as they come in to praise them in this early period. However, as some particular point is passed, they start to rather be holding that person or that government back to be more critical in that sense. I believe that this is an aspect of the culture of journalism in Japan, and this in turn serves to shape the public opinion as well. This, in the case of some people or some administrations, can happen even after half a year, for example. So this is part of the culture of the mass media in Japan, I believe, is related to this. However, I do not necessarily believe that this is a particular characteristic only of the Japanese media compared to globally. This is something which may also occur in other places.
You have a question
there. My name is Kelly Olson from Agence France Presse. In your opinion, how likely are we to see a challenge to Prime Minister Abe's leadership from within the LDP before the next election for the LDP presidency in a little over a year's time? And if we were to see that, what would likely trigger it and who would likely lead it? Thank you.
自民党のですね、選挙は来年の自民党の総裁選挙は来年の9月であります。で、来年の9月には間違いなく総裁選挙になると思います。で、私は少なくとも石破茂は必ず立つと思います。で、石破茂は国会議員の支持は弱いんですけれども、地方の自民党員の支持はかなり集める可能性がありますので、決選投票で、2位まで入れば決選投票になりますが、その可能性はあるんではないかというように思っておりますが、岸田もですね、野田聖子も立ってくると思います。で、その時に安倍首相が立候補するかどうかというところが問題なんですね。その安倍首相が立候補すれば、私は安倍首相は勝つんだろうと思います。というのは安倍首相の勢力は強いですし、安倍首相を支持する勢力はもう半数持ってますから、したがって安倍首相が立つような状況が1年間続いていれば、安倍政権はさらに次の3年間、おそらく3年持つかどうかは分かりませんが、次の3年間に向かうことができると思いますが、そうでない場合は、その石破とか岸田とか野田聖子とか、そういう人たちのいわば争いになってくると思いますね。これが自民党の動きですけれども、ただ 総選挙は小選挙区制で行われますので、対抗勢力というものをどう作るかというのが一方の大きになると思います。で、民進党は8月の21日告示、9月1日その投票ということで、次の指導部を選ぶわけです。そしてその指導部が枝野になるか前原になるかまだ出ていない誰かになるか、その勢力、その新しいリーダーがこの来年のですね、今年から来年にかけて行われる総選挙に駒を進めるわけですが、その時に民進党が独自の力で300議席の小選挙区にですね、候補を立てることができるかどうか、それが大きなポイントだと思います。できない場合には共産党との協力ってことになりますが、共産党との協力ではよくて3分の1しか議席は取れないと思いますから、自由民主党政権が続くと思います。ただその時に日本マクロンが出てくるかどうかですね。先ほど言いました地方自治体の中でこれでは日本はいけないと、もう一つの勢力を作ろうという動きが水面下で進んでおりますが、彼らが出てくるかどうか、その点がもう一つのポイントになると思います。
If we look towards the election for the presidency of the LDP is said to be in September of next year, I believe that it's almost certain that Mr. Ishiba Shigeru will be standing at this time. While he may not have significant support within the Diet, I believe that it would be possible for him to garner quite a lot or significant support from within the local or regional parts of the Liberal Democratic Party. Therefore, if the presidency of the LDP were to go to a vote, it could be possible that he would be able to garner enough support at that time. The names also of Mr. Kishida and also Noda Seiko are also, of course, potential candidates for this for standing for the presidency of the LDP as well. Whether Prime Minister Abe will stand or not at that time, I believe, will be a significant point as to how this will go forward. And I believe that if he does indeed stand at that time, it is almost certain that he will also be successful. He has, of course, a strong power and influence within the party and still the majority of support internally as well. Therefore, if he is successful in continuing to be the president of the LDP, I believe that Mr. Abe will start to look towards, shall we say, the next 3 years from then as well. However, if not, then we will be likely to see a struggle between Ishiba, Kishida, and Noda, I would say. If we look at the situation of a potential general election to be called as well, of course, this would be a single-seat constituency election to take place within this. The question will be what kind of alternative or opposition may arise at that time as well. The Democratic Party is now going in to vote for its new leadership. This will be on the 1st of September after the campaign starts on August 21. This may be Mr. Edano, maybe Mr. Maehara, or indeed some other name may be coming as part of this. But the leadership within the Democratic Party will also have a determining factor in regards to what we will be seeing coming in the next year. However, whether the Democratic would on its own strength be able to achieve 300 seats, for example, within the single seat constituency, I believe is rather not so positive prospects in that. This would lead to the questions, for example, of potential cooperation with the Communist Party of Japan, but I think that even in such a case, only around 1/3 would be possible of the seats. The question then comes to whether a Japanese Macron may appear in this next general election. And there are these movements under the surface, as I mentioned, from within regional politics in Japan. We may see some movements in regards to that.
Morita-san has said he can give us as much time as we like. We've got two questions.
もう少しよろしいということで、あとお二人ですね、手を挙げていた方はいました。
Yeah, yeah.
フリーランスの小山です。今日はどうもありがとうございます。日本外交が混迷期にあるというふうにおっしゃいましたけれども、これはどうして混迷期にあるんでしょうか。また北朝鮮問題が今後かなり厄介な問題になると思いますが、これが日本の外交に与える影響をどうご覧になってますでしょうか。
My name is Koyama. I am a freelance. I would like to ask you to extrapolate further on your comments about Japanese diplomacy and the state that it is in at the moment. Also, we will be going into rather a complex or difficult situation in regards to the DPRK. So if you could mention some more about that.
日本の外交がですね、日米同盟、もうこのただ一つ日米同盟を進めていくということですが、率直に言ってアメリカが今のトランプ政権がどう動くかですね、読めなくなってるんじゃないでしょうか。政治家も外交当局も読めなくなっているように思います。で本当に注意深く、あるいはドキドキしながら、あるいはビクビクしながらアメリカを見ているというのが今の現状だと思います。その意味で混迷期と申し上げました。
So first of all, in regards to the Japanese diplomacy, well, we can see that Japan is holding, singularly holding up the Japan-US alliance at the center there. However, we are in a current situation where it is not sure, or it cannot be certain, what Mr. Trump and his administration will do. It's very difficult to read that at the moment for both politicians and also for diplomats. Therefore, I believe people are very cautiously, or even nervously watching this situation.
北朝鮮に対してはもう制裁一筋というやり方をとってますが、それで果たしてですねいいのかという意見は随分出ておりますね。やっぱり日本としてですね何らかのパイプといいますか、そういうものを北朝鮮との間にも作る必要があるんじゃないかという意見はあるんですけれども、以前はパイプ自身があったんですが、今はほとんどなくなっていると思います。そしてまたそれを作ろうという動きをしたときに、攻撃を受けるんじゃないかということを心配して動けないという状況もあります。中国に対してもすっきりしない状況が続いておりますですね。二階さんのように中国との関係、もっと重視しなきゃいかんという人もいますし、そうでない人もいると、そういうことも含めまして私は日本外交は目標をなんて言いますか喪失しつつあるというように思っております。
In regards to the DPRK, at the moment the Japanese policy is relying heavily on the sole policy of sanctions. However, we are starting to hear more opinions questioning whether this is sufficient or whether this is effective, shall we say. There are also voices who are recommending that Japan should attempt to develop its own pipes or connections with the DPRK. For example, in the past, there may have been pipes or connections between the two countries. However, there are almost none existing today. And also when if someone were to make moves to develop these kinds of pipes, connections, or contacts, again, they are, there is the chance of them risking becoming under attack for that as well. It's a very difficult situation to take any steps towards this purpose. In regards to China as well, we are in somewhat of a unnerving or unstable situation. There are, of course, some people such as Mr. Nikai who believe and emphasize that more importance needs to be placed on the relationship with China. There are others who are not so much or not holding this same position. However, I believe that this shows that Japanese diplomacy is perhaps losing sight of its goals in a way.
Well, I'm afraid time is up because I need to prepare this room for the next event. But I'm sure Mr. Morita, if anybody wants to talk to him directly, he's promised to make his time available. We've had a talk very full of information. I would have liked to hear more about Mr. Nikai, for example, with him. He seems to have a close relationship, but unfortunately we don't have the time to go into that. Morita Sensei, thank you very much. This is the traditional offering after a speech, a one-year membership of this club. Please use the club. I know you're very business.
どうもありがとう。